Again, the book is called Failure Factory: How Baltimore City Public Schools Deprive Taxpayers and Students of a Future, by my guest, Chris Papst. Chris, you mentioned that the governor went to a private school. The governor has apparently presidential aspirations. How do you run for president when you're governing a state like this, where the Baltimore public school system is like this, and apparently the governor is doing nothing at all about it?
It's a struggle. You remember Martin O'Malley. He tried to run for president probably about 15 years ago. He was a former governor of Maryland, and he floundered on the national stage. And part of the reason is because you have an anchor like Baltimore City that is really struggling. And you don't have people that are standing up saying, hey, we need to have a better school system. If we're going to put this much money into the school system, we need to ensure that it's going to properly educate the students of Baltimore City. You know, back in 2017, when I first started doing Project Baltimore for Fox 45 News, we're under the umbrella of Sinclair Broadcasting. When we first started doing it, Baltimore City had a $1.3 billion budget. Today, it has a $1.7 billion budget. So the budget has increased by $400 million a year. The graduation rate in 2017 was 72%. The graduation rate today is 72%. So taxpayers continue to put massive amounts of money into this school system, and the students are not benefiting in any measurable way. Who is benefiting is the adults. And Larry, in those 8 years from 2017 to today, the school system has lost 6,500 students. Enrollment's going down because the population of Baltimore is going down. But there's nearly 1,300 more adults working for the school system. So you have more adults employed to educate fewer students with $400 million additional dollars, and there's no improved educational outcomes.
Yeah, you mentioned O'Malley. As I recall, O'Malley was even the mayor of Baltimore, wasn't he, at one point?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. What's the over/under on when Chris Papst gets called racist for your book, if it hasn't happened already?
It's in the book. So I have emails and I have phone calls from people who have reached out to me in Project Baltimore calling me racist.
Yeah.
I will point out, Larry, that I do have 2 NAACP awards. I have one from the Maryland State Conference NAACP award in 2023. I won their state level Vanguard award. And I also have the Excellence in Education Reporting Award from the NAACP Randallstown, Baltimore County chapter. So within the state of Maryland, there are certainly Black Americans, African Americans that do appreciate what we're trying to do, which is shine a spotlight on a failing school system that is 93% minority, and nobody else is screaming about this.
What is the NAACP's position?
On
the school system? System? What should be done? Are they yelling? Are they screaming? Are they outraged?
Well, not anymore. New leadership has come into the NAACP in Maryland, and this new leadership is more accepting of the current state of Baltimore City Public Schools. It was the previous leadership in 2023 that offered me that state level award. They're coming out and they're saying, we need to do better. This has been generations in the making. And you had mentioned earlier, what are some of the solutions?
Yes, let's talk about that. What do we do about this? What do we do about this?
So in Failure Factory, I go to schools that are succeeding, schools that have the same funding, schools that draw students from the same neighborhoods, and they're seeing great success. And what you see as the common denominator through all of them is a no-nonsense leader who holds the children accountable, who has discipline, who raises the level of expectation, does not lower standards, raises standards to where the students need to be. And also what you have to be able to do is you got to get these problem kids out of the schools. Any teacher listening to us right now knows in a class of 30, if you have one kid who's a problem, it affects the education of the other 29. You have to remove the kids that are a problem and the kids who want to be there, which is most of them, by the way. Most of them want a good education, but you got to get those problem kids out. And they're not willing to do that in a city like Baltimore.
The Heartland Institute, which is a think tank in Chicago, once did a formula about what happens if you have one knucklehead, let alone 2 or 3 in a class. It just basically trashes the ability of everybody else to learn. The bad kids have got to be removed. And a lot of people don't want to do that. They even consider that to be racist because a disproportionately large number of the bad kids happen to be black kids, even though the school system mostly is black. And they yell and scream about how unfair that is to remove a black kid. Now, I asked you about fatherlessness. Is there a link between the quality of education we're seeing in urban America and the fact that 70% of black kids today enter the world without a father in the home married to the mother?
Well, I think there certainly is. Yeah. I think that anybody would say that 2 parents can generally parent better than 1. I think that that's just a logical conclusion that anybody would come to. But that's not to say that there are single moms out there that can't do a great job. And it's also not to say that it does not excuse the school systems. Under our social contract, a school system gets our money, our taxpayer dollars, under the condition that any student who walks into that door, it doesn't matter the conditions from which they come from at home, that student has to be educated. And if the school systems cannot educate them, they should give the money to somebody else and let them try.
Absolutely.
So a school system is getting $1.7 billion. It is their responsibility. You have to hold them accountable. And if they're telling you that they cannot educate a child because of the conditions from which that child comes from home, that is not true. That school system should not get the money. It should go to somebody who can. And in a school system like Baltimore, and we've already gone over how bad the educational outcomes are in Baltimore, they clearly struggle to educate these kids. But if they're getting $1.7 billion, we must hold them accountable.
Chris, we only have 1 minute left in this segment. One of the factors, I think, about the lack of outrage is I think a lot of parents are completely unaware of it. As you pointed out, many of the parents are educated in the same bad system. I saw one report one time where this kid could not read or write, even though he's about ready to graduate, and his parent had no idea he couldn't read or write. Just a few seconds left.
Sure. So we talk to teachers in this book who say that Baltimore City Schools has handed diplomas to students who cannot read that diploma. If you want to talk about crime, you want to talk about blight, you want to talk about poverty, Failure Factory argues that those are not the problems. Those are the symptoms of the problems. The problem is a failed education system.
The book is called Failure Factory: How Baltimore City Public Schools Deprive Taxpayers and Students of a Future. It is by my guest, Chris Papst. Chris, we're going to take another break. We're going to have to come back just for a few more minutes. I want to talk to you about how this affects the future of these kids, how bad these schools are. My last few minutes with my guest, Chris Papst, who's done a heroic deed, I think, for the country by publishing this book, Failure Factory: How Baltimore City Public Schools Deprive Taxpayers and Students of a Future. Chris, I was looking at Chicago public school teachers, public schools the other day, and there are about 30 schools in the area, mostly in the South and in the West, where 0% of the kids can read at grade level. And I sarcastically said that explains why you're finding people like Lori Lightfoot and Brandon Johnson being elected. If you can't read, you can't filter, you can't think things through, this is really just savaging their future.
So I interviewed Walter Williams a number of years ago, and he is somebody that I had grown up reading my entire life, and he reached out to me after I had written some articles in Baltimore. Now, this is 2017. And I went there and I interviewed him. And what he said to me was, if you were the leader of the Ku Klux Klan, what better way to ensure poverty than to lower the standards and lower the quality of education in our inner cities? That's what Walter Williams said to me.
Right.
And that was something that hit me really hard. And it's something that I still think about today, obviously. It's 8 years later, and you ask me this question, I'm thinking about him.
And Chris, we just have 1 minute. We just have 1 minute left. Yeah. Walter Williams was a good friend of mine. He grew up in poverty, a single parent household in Philadelphia. But the standards were higher. And he told me the same thing. The standards were higher. Yeah. And Thomas Sowell told me the standards were higher. He grew up without a father and a mother in Harlem, but the schools had high standards. So this is, as you point out, this is not complicated. Hold kids up to a high standard, get rid of the bad kids, demand excellence, and you'll get it.
You will. I mean, if you have children, you understand that the children are going to meet the expectations of the adults. So my daughters, if I tell them to do 10 jumping jacks, they do 10. If I tell them to do 1, they do 1. In our school systems, we're having them do 1.
Failure Factory: How Baltimore City Public Schools Deprive Taxpayers and Students of a Future by Chris Papst. Chris, let's hope your book makes a difference. Let's hope parents are now better educated and the outrage that we need will happen. Chris, thank you very much for coming on. I appreciate it.